Greetings, Barbara E. Ringrose. I'm the founder of Wow Women Optimizing Women, and you have arrived here with myself and LaQuincia Nichols of experiencecoaching.com. I'm with wowwomenus.com. You can view our websites and take a look at what it is, what we do. But tonight, we want to talk to you about conflict. That's one of the things that we seem to be having so much. And Quincy, you know this best because you deal with this almost on a regular basis, correct?
Absolutely. Conflict is where I sort of lean into my superpower. It's not something that I'm afraid of. I think if you lean into it with grace, you can come out the other side in much closer and richer relationships. So go conflict.
Oh, God. And how to find your voice and protect your peace, even though you say starting with grace, because sometimes you don't feel very graceful,
Right.
either towards yourself or to another person when you have conflict, do you?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think and grace is a learned skill, right? When you're in conflict, because oftentimes we are probably in a more heightened emotional state. So to be able to identify emotionally where you are, right? And how can we maybe reframe or anchor into something else takes skills, takes strategy, takes practice. So hopefully our goal is, throughout this conversation is to share some great tips with the listeners of Optimize Our Two podcasts.
So as women, we're told that we got to keep the peace. We're always keeping the peace in the household. We're always keeping the peace at work. We're keeping the peace in our relationships in our community. We're trying to avoid confrontation, although sometimes I think it just keeps knocking at our door, and put the other's needs. That's one thing that boggles my mind is putting the needs of so many other people in front of our own needs, even our basic needs.
Absolutely.
I was traveling. We were in Aruba last week and we were at this restaurant, and it was my daughter Tara, myself, and my granddaughter Josie. And there was a woman and her husband, and she had a baby, and she had a stroller with the baby. She's trying to order food. Hubby gets up and walks away. She's sitting there, mommy's sitting there with baby. She's trying to eat and shoving this food in her mouth as she's trying to juggle her baby. She's doing this. And I thought to myself, I can remember back in those days, hubby just totally walking away from me while I have these children. And my basic needs, bathing or eating, we tend to overlook our needs. And when does the conflict avoidance start costing you? That's my question to you, Ms. Professional.
Yeah, I think it's the unpopular answer is it probably starts before the baby's here, right? And really having an honest conversation with your spouse about what are the sort of roles and expectations, right? It may be a bit more than just the gender roles that are defined, but when you think about your household, what are the ways in which we're both going to support each other in the process of parenting the children to make sure that our basic needs are being met, right? Now, I get that is sort of if everything sort of rolls out in this perfect way, we know oftentimes that's not how life happens. Oftentimes the children are here, right? And then we need to figure it out. What does need to happen and sometimes in that process is having a plan. And one of the things I talk about a lot is as women, sometimes we love to stay in the safeness of assumptions, right? And if we are in a place where we assume that, I need to eat, we assume that, that I did not bathe today, rather than really being clear and asking and creating a space for support, right? And allowing someone to help you. And then I also think regardless of the gender, when someone's giving you that help, the help may not look the same exact way you want it to be done. But as long as there isn't any sort of like major damage that's happening, let that person do it their way. We have to be willing to release control sometimes. And that's sometimes what it comes down to.
We all have, I use thresholds,
Yes.
for that balance. Some of us have different thresholds. Some of us can allow the dirt on the steps to stay there for 2 months. And others, if they see a cat hair, they want to clean it up right away. So there's some difference in even the domestic roles and who does what when, and when is enough. But resentment kind of sort of creeps in, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
You try and talk these things out, and we're going to have a baby. I'm going to need your help, especially for me to just do. But until you have that baby, I can tell you, Quincy, I went down that road 3 times with less than 33 months between my three children.
Mhm.
Nobody could have prepared me for all of the daily activities that having children. I thought you just basically had to change their diapers, stick a bottle in their mouth,
And they sleep the rest of
bottle
the time,
them,
right?
put them to sleep, and that was it. Oh, quite contraire.
Listen, I am having the unique pleasure of having my 8-year-old niece with me for the summer, and while she's not a baby, she does require a certain level of attention that, has really had a dynamic impact on our household. Let's just say that. But I think oftentimes where we're unwilling to have the conversation and really speak up about what we need, right? That is going to be sort of always a circle back point is, have you been clear about what it is that you need in terms of support, creating some sort of schedule, right? Some sort of strategic plan. We are very comfortable having a strategic plan that we follow within our professional or our workplace environments, but we don't think about it when we come home. But for something to run well, right? And if you think about your home, your marriage is sort of like a business, right? There needs to be a
Yeah,
planning process
yeah.
and knowing who is going to show up and in support and what type of roles, right? And having that clear level of responsibility.
And one of the things too, I talked a minute when I led into this about avoiding confrontation. I think women kind of like want to try and avoid confrontation because it takes so much out of them. And then they can't function right at work. They can't function right at home. They can't function in the community or raising their children. And I think what ends up happening is we think, well, at the moment, it's easier for not to direct my spouse, my mate, bring to their attention the fact that they have been leaving trash all over the family room
Hmm.
or coming through the door with mud or stuff on their feet, or if I'm in the office with someone and every time I go to the photocopier, there's no paper or somebody's jammed it and they walked away, there's kind of like a point, a saturation point,
Right.
the point of no return, where it's like you end up eroding your trust. And I know people may say, well, how does that erode somebody's trust? But when you're working as a team, whether it's at home with your family members or it's in the workplace with others, you're kind of like you've got this little working relationship
Hmm.
that when everybody plays their role, when
Right.
everybody contributes, when everybody functions at a high level, no, maybe some people will fill the paper bin in the photocopier halfway, and other people just put 25 sheets of paper in it.
Sure.
That's cool as long as it's function. But I'm not talking about that. But if all of us can work together, and it's very difficult to get people to that level. So even though that confrontation avoidance may work temporarily, I think at the end of the day, it creates a lot of hostility,
Yeah.
takes anger, and it
Hmm.
takes a lot from us. And
It
you,
even more than that, Barb. It's the resentment, it's the anger, it's the hostility, right? Those all
mm,
then lead indirectly to, right, your money, your time, your energy, your self respect. And on the part of it where when we think about you, maybe I always challenge and say, a lot of us were not raised in a way of how to really manage through conflict in a healthy way, right? And even when you think about being in a place where you don't want to approach conflict, because some of us are coming from households and conditions and systems to where having a difference of opinion was seen as confrontation, right? Wanting to do something a different way
yeah,
was seen as confrontation. So for a lot of people, they are learning how to use their voice in a way that enables for them to be able to speak up boldly, clearly, and confident about what they want, what their expectations are. Now, when you think about and you talk about the different roles that we may have in the household, the same way in the workplace, we have a lot of people who are doing the thing, right? They're doing the job, but
we're
the
all
role
people.
isn't clearly identified. They don't really understand how they contribute and how their contribution leads to the greater success. So when you talk about a situation of refilling the printer or the dirty boots on the step or whatever that may be, trying to find that win-win solution of, hey, I know when you get home, you're tired, you want to kick your boots off. Having that extra dirt on the step is an extra piece of work for me. What if we created a system, right, to where There's something for your boots to be dropped in, so maybe it's not
Have a
on the
mat
porch
at the
anymore.
door.
Right,
That's what we
something.
did when my kids were
Exactly.
growing up. To this day, they still do that. And it's funny, I've been with the same man for over 17 years, and I can barely get him to leave his shoes at the door. I've had pets that were easier to train. Finding the confidence in yourself, though,
Mhm.
because this constant conflict, it seems like we have so many more conflicts today than, let's say, we did a
Everywhere.
decade ago
Yeah.
for a variety of reasons. And one of it's getting to be annoying because it's just out there is too much. I'm like, let's switch the channel, let's change things up. We still need to do it, and you said with grace. And I think one of the people think, well, how do you do it with grace? Well, I think one of the things when you meet up with someone, and I just had a family member. There was a situation that happened months ago. And so I had to wait until we were face to face. I didn't feel that it was something that we could do like a virtual situation.
Sure.
You're in Arizona, I'm in Maryland. We could have handled it this way. I wanted to wait until there was an opportunity where we were face to face. So then I could say to the person that, hey, first want to tell you I love you. I think a lot of you. I think you're very good at what you do, et cetera, et cetera, and just did some positive points. And I could see
Excellent.
from the look from the eyes that there was like, oh no, what is she going to say to me?
Waiting for the other
But
shoe to drop, right?
and I said, but when something happened a couple of months ago, you made me feel very embarrassed and you put me in a situation and I was not comfortable with it. And I wanted to share that with you. And I wanted to do a rewind. I
Mhm.
wanted to withdraw from the situation and I wanted to explain to you why I was doing that. And I felt that I was coming in, showing her the respect she deserved. She had no clue. She felt like she was doing something right. But one of the things I'm trying to express is, and you mentioned this, I know, in what you do in your work, Quincy, is no means no.
Right.
If I am in a situation with you, especially in a group of people, and there are witnesses
Mhm.
and others that are watching this play out, if I'm saying no and you're saying yes, no, yes, I don't like no, yes. I like once I say no, I'm done with that. And
Right.
then I don't like you constantly conflicting with me if we're in a group setting. And I explained that to this person. It made me feel very uncomfortable. And I felt like the people that were around us looking at us, I said, it's kind of like date rape.
Mhm.
You hear about this. Of course, it's a totally different situation, but
Sure.
nonetheless, it's a problem and people
Mhm.
can relate to it. It's extreme. But when somebody says no to you, we need to say, oh, are you sure? Just like when we're
Mhm.
logging out of something, do you really want to log out? Just
Yeah.
having that question raised is fine, but one time.
One time.
Y I think that's, reasonable to do that, and I think going into it with positive. So, if I would have approached her and I'm coming to you, Quincy, I got this problem with this girl at work. We had this situation. It was embarrassing. It involved other people. I wanted to gracefully come out of it. And then all of a sudden, her and I did, by the way, end the situation on a positive note. But
Good.
what happens when it goes awry, when the person becomes defensive, for instance, and starts arguing with you?
Well,
Then how do you handle it?
yeah, and that's a real fear for a lot of people, right? Because they don't want to create more drama or more conflict, but you do want
Right,
to be heard. And ultimately what we are asking is for someone to make a behavior change, right? Whatever they did to you, you don't want them maybe to do it again, right? And if they're unwilling to change that behavior, just in the same light in which you want the check-in one time of the no, right?
right.
That's up to them. But what's up to for you is if they're unwilling to change their behavior, then the responsibility then becomes on you for you to make the change. If this person is making you feel uncomfortable, whatever that thing is, how do you limit your interaction with them? Because it's not fair for you to want for them to remove themselves. It is incumbent upon you to remove yourself out of that situation. You can't
So by
control them.
saying, I really want to share this with you
Hmm.
because I feel our relationship is strong enough and it's important to me.
Yes.
that I share this with you. I want you to
Great opening.
understand where I'm coming from. I
Yes.
think by putting on yourself, this is how it makes me feel, or this is how you
Absolutely.
made me feel.
Impact is
This is
always key.
right. As opposed to coming from an attack, coming in gracefully again, as opposed to coming to attack. I really didn't like what you said to me in front
Mhm.
of all those people. It really made me feel horrible. We don't want to open with that part.
Absolutely
No,
not. No, I think the way you did it, right? Leading with the kindness, actually what you want to come from the conversation, what your expectations are on the other side once we have this conversations, which may feel a bit icky. It may feel a bit challenging. It may feel difficult and uncomfortable. But the goal for the end of this is for us to still be in community, in relationship with each other, if that's the truth, right? And but
right,
if it's not something that where we can maintain relationship because we just have two different varying points of view on a
right.
topic, and it is a disruption for the rest of the people around us, then we have to make a change, right? Now it may feel
Yeah,
significant because are we talking about now we're forever changing the dynamics of a group trip that we may take every year?
right.
Maybe, but if it's that
That's possible.
significant to you, right, then that's the choice that you have to make. And that's the part of conflict where people become uncomfortable because oftentimes we are so focused on just wanting the other person to change. But if we can't get to that win-win outcome, then the responsibility comes on us to what do we need to change to limit ourselves being in those types of situations.
Some people are firecrackers, though. You start talking to them, and they get on the defensive right away,
Hmm.
and then they start scorekeeping. That's a good
Absolutely.
conversation for us to have in the future. And they'll start, well, I did this for you, I did that for you, I did this, and they start justifying the relationship from their perspective. And I think it's important that you keep that emotion in check and
Hmm.
listen to them. But at the same time, there has to be a limit as to how much you can put up with,
Yes.
or now you've gotten off task, you've gotten off topic, and now the discussion that you feel should have been between two adults, maybe a couple of minutes, now it's like 15 minutes, and the anger, the hostility has increased.
Absolutely. And then there's also sometimes the emotion can be clouded in distraction of other things, right? To where we're no longer actually discussing the core topic, right? You brought one thing
Right.
and now they're listing
Totally
everything they've ever
sincere.
done for you in this conversation, which again comes back to the self anchoring point of, is this a person that you want to be in community with anyway?
Yeah. When to release the relationship, or as you mentioned, every year we go to the same beach. Every year we go
Hmm.
on the same trip. Every year we do this as a family, as a group, whatever. And sometimes the season's over.
Hmm.
You've done it 6 times, 10 times, but maybe the last couple of times out haven't been a good thing. And
Yep.
I think sometimes we have to realize breaking up is hard to do,
Right.
but at the same time, there's some consequences if you continue in the relationship and you continue. It's like the definition of insanity.
Unity.
If you
Absolutely.
continue to do the same thing over and over again, and this is one of the things I've experienced with a couple of people, or in a couple in a group dynamic. I would continue to put myself in that situation, accept the invitation. The takeaway was always the same, where I felt less than. And
Hmm.
sometimes you have best friends here and you have best friends here. You have family member here and you have family member here. You get along with both sides, but you bring them together and it's not exactly a fun time.
It may
So,
not be. And it's sometimes, especially as the group dynamics get bigger and
oh
like
goodness.
that becomes a big of a challenge because you're managing so many different personalities, right? And I would say
Yeah,
if to your point, right, if the season of the trips we've been doing for the last 6 years, 10 years, whatever that may be, we also may have evolved to become different people over these years to where
that's
my
right.
expectations, my standards are different, right? So if you're still treating me as the Barb you knew when you first met me 10 years ago, I've had a lot of evolution since then. And the way I may want to interact, communicate, or experience people could feel very different. And hopefully we get to a place to where if it's no longer working, we can release or sunset that relationship, as I term it, in a way
Yeah.
that still is honor and graceful before it becomes ugly and hurtful and manipulative and you have the crosstalk and all of those types of things. Because also where you have to be clear about, and I know we always talk about boundaries. At some point, I bring it into the conversation and you tell me,
Yeah.
Quince, everybody in their boundaries. However, what I tell people, if you have a boundary with someone and you have that conversation with them and there isn't, excuse me, there isn't any consequence for them crossing your boundary, then it really is just a suggestion and it really doesn't matter anyway. Right. So if you think about that situation with the person you were talking about how they made you feel, right, the follow up point on that to really make sure you're seeing it all the way through is if this situation is to happen again, what are your expectations of them? And then what are your expectations of
And
yourself?
I think that's an important point, and that's a conversation I'm gonna be having in the very
Hmm.
near future, as a matter
Good.
of fact. Um, Understanding that relationships like seasons, it's not meant to be forever, and you're not gonna have the same season be like the previous season, even if you do have that season ever again.
Absolutely.
That every conflict doesn't necessarily have a resolution. And
Yeah.
I think when we have a conflict there, I had mentioned to you before we got on this joint call today, I had mentioned to you that there are some people who initiate issues and
Hmm.
they have no resolution. They have no way to get out of the situation. They don't help fix a situation. And then you have other people, they're capable then of fixing or finding solutions.
Hmm.
And not all people can do that. They're good at initiating a situation, not good at coming together with you and creating a
Solution.
balance exit strategy, if you
Yeah.
will, or a meeting of the minds, or well, let's agree to disagree. There are some people that you can see in their eyes, they're going to hold on to this one for a long time. Respect is consistently important.
Hmm.
And I know in relationships, there comes a time, there's that pivotal part where the respect suddenly changes. I know in a situation I'm thinking of, I don't know when the respect changed. I
Mm.
don't, and I tried to think that when did that happen? But I do know that when a relationship starts to go awry, whether you're it's in the business, that person that you've known at work for a long time and you have had this great relationship, then all of a sudden in the middle of meetings they make derogatory statements at you towards you in front of others, or it's in a family event or with your partner and they make derogatory statements. Sometimes the respect breaks down, and whatever it is, whatever that pivotal moment was for them or for you or a situation that happened, sometimes it becomes so one sided, it becomes so unbalanced that it doesn't seem to be that there is a solution. Maybe it's timing.
Mhm.
Maybe it could be at a different time, 6 months or a year. But if it gets to a point where you're feeling less than or you're feeling hurt through every interaction with this person, sometimes it's best to sever the ties. And that's
Yeah.
unfortunate that we have to do that. We want to be friends with everyone. Or if it gets into this high anxiety where you develop a panic attack. Panic attacks aren't fun, and
No.
your body will tell you you've crossed that red line
Mhm.
way too far.
Yep.
Listen, take heed.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you say that because oftentimes people don't really think about the health impacts, right?
Mhm.
Sometimes when it feels like you just swallow it and swallowing it and swallow it, and eventually it has to come back out. And being able to let me circle back. When you talk about the people who create the conflict, I recently read in one of the books I'm studying right now, and they're called like conflict entrepreneurs, and they love to be connected with people who are solutions driven because they get to come in, sort of mix up all this chaos, what it can feel like sometimes, and then put the responsibility of the solution on someone else, right? So when you think about yourself, that's where you carry that heavy responsibility. I can see that when
Yeah.
you think about, right, how do we sort of sever this relationship and how do we end it in a way to where if we can't agree, then sometimes it is just always just ending it with saying, you know what, you and I, we're going to see this differently. maybe this is not either a topic or a subject that we need to continue to have conversations
And
with.
that's true. Maybe you just can't go to that particular topic. And we see that now
Mhm.
in our society where, my God, some people,
Right.
they just can't let something alone and they just keep going. They got some kind of like, it's some kind of mental disorder. Some of the things I see, it's to a
It's
point
some
where
of
it's
it.
almost a derangement type
Mhm.
syndrome. But walking away isn't necessarily a failure.
Yeah.
Even though you feel like you let the other person down, if you're one of those type people, or
Mhm.
even if you feel like you've let yourself down because you wanted this so much. You wanted to
Right.
be able to be on that team at work. You wanted to have that strong family and you wanted to have that great community that you live, work in, and so forth. And there's
Mhm.
just certain dynamics that it you have to sever the ties.
Right.
And
You're mourning the dream that's lost, right? What you thought
yeah,
would and could be. But sometimes when we are radically honest with ourselves, we oftentimes knew the relationship was probably on the decline already. And
yeah,
maybe the
sometimes
things
that's
that
hard to
bonded us,
face.
yeah, sometimes the things that bonded us together no longer bonds. If our interest and our evolution has changed to where we are no longer in alignment, it's not about good or bad or right or wrong. We are just on different planes of existence right now, and that's okay, right? But we know that we don't serve each other as well together as we did before. So
Right.
let's
Yeah.
talk about how do we exit out of it.
And sometimes it's just like, the ended on agree to disagree, and
Mhm.
I love you. I'm sure we'll see each other in the future and, a nice smile or a hug
Yeah.
if you're, able to do that at that time
And
and
if
go
it's someone
separate
that you
ways.
wanna leave the door open for, right, letting
Yeah,
just being in a space of, "Listen, let me know. I wanna stay in support of you, but maybe, I don't need to come to everything that you're doing because I just have different goals or things that I'm focused on right now." And those are hard conversations, but they're honest conversations, and the people on the other side will value that even if they don't like it, but even more, you're gonna walk away valuing yourself because you didn't self-abandon, you didn't
in time,
dishonor.
sometimes the wound's a little raw until you get through it and
Sure.
so forth. But I think strong women who, Optimize Her was designed by you and I to talk to women, professional business women, or women in general.
Mhm.
We, don't necessarily want to avoid conflict. We wanna navigate it with courage and wisdom, and you can only get courage and wisdom through experience.
Right.
And once you go through certain things, you develop that. And then there's also the self-respect, because if I keep giving in to this entity, or
Mhm.
maybe it's bad relationships over and over and over again, I'm losing my self-respect, I'm losing my dignity. And you want to make sure that you're honoring your inner voice,
Absolutely.
communicating your truth. We hear about the truth, your truth, a lot, but you want to protect that peace, because at the end of the day, when you put your head down on that pillow at night, for me, I do certain things before I go to bed at night. For some people, they say, "Oh, I would get all pumped up." But at the end of the day, you want to be able to rest your head on that pillow on those last few seconds before you go off to sleep in
Mhm.
peace. And
Yes.
with these kind of things, if you don't get some of these things resolved during the day and find resolution, then you're not going to rest well. And that's going to affect your health and well being. And we want you
Absolutely.
to do something. Quincy and I both feel very powerful about this message we're sending you here today on Optimizer too. We want to educate, elevate, and empower women. And for all you men that are listening, we're so about doing that. And through
Absolutely.
these different topics, especially with relationships and how we're having difficulty navigating through them right now, because we want strong women to grow strong together. And we would like strong people to grow stronger together here at Optimize Her too. I thank you for listening to us and coming to see Quincy and I. We both like to share our viewpoints with you. Please comment, here at Optimize Her too. We'd like to hear your thoughts about
Absolutely.
relationships as well.
Yes. Well, comment, like, share. Send this to a gal who maybe she's been replaying a few conversations in her head.
There
Send
you
her this
go.
video. Let her
This would be
help
very
her figure out
helpful.
how to open up that conversation.
And be sure to follow us.
Yes.
Thank
Yes,
you
yes,
so
yes.
much. Quincy, I'll see you soon. Stay well,
Take care.
everyone.